Next item.
Item 9C, receive City Council Subcommittee report and adopt resolution approving the subcommittee's recommended increase in fines for parking violations defined in the California Vehicle Code and the San Bruno Municipal Code. We have one speaker card.
Connie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This item is returning to you from your conversation at your last council meeting on July 10th, at which time you received recommendations from staff for increases in our parking violation fines that have not been upgraded or increased or comprehensively reviewed since 2010. Well, the City Council established a subcommittee consisting of council members Salazar and Medina, who met separately, actually immediately after the meeting, and have rendered a different set of recommendations. And I would just call to your attention, so there was a little bit of confusion about the materials in the packet, and I believe we handed out to you tonight a hard copy of the spreadsheet that was reviewed and submitted by the subcommittee with green shading on the line, or the column rather, showing this, the subcommittee's recommendations. That same spreadsheet also shows the previous staff recommendations and the current fees for ease of understanding. I'll just make one quick additional comment before I turn over to the subcommittee to answer your questions or provide any additional comments. And that is that once the City Council acts on the fine schedule that is best meets your interest, then we will do some additional work to prepare that into a spreadsheet along with late penalty charges that are part of the overall fine schedule, and package that to submit to the traffic commissioner, which is the next step in the process. So this material that you have in front of you tonight is for your discussion and decision purposes, and the actual attachment to the resolution will be a slightly reformatted version of the material that you decide should represent the fines for parking violations going forward. Thank you.
What I'd like to do is hear if the subcommittee has anything, and then we have a speaker, and then we can open it up to council for their questions.
Okay.
If that's
Sure.
whoever would like to.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. Thank you. So first of all, I wanted to thank Councilmember Medina for working with me to make this a timely turnaround. I was concerned about dragging it out, and here we are at the very next meeting, and we were able to accomplish it. And I want to thank staff for also going through and cleaning up our work and making sure that it was available to the rest of the council. When Marty and I met, we did take a lot of things into consideration. We brought up comments that were made at the previous meeting, and one of our concerns was to not penalize unfairly the residents in certain areas that are already impacted by parking, and trying to balance that with fines that carry some weight and might better influence behavior. We looked specifically at ones that we felt were safety issues, things that could impact safety in the neighborhoods, and looking carefully at those, we recommended that those go to the maximum amount. And across the board, as was noted, we increased the minimum that was 40 across the board to 50 across the board, thinking that was more impactful and sent a stronger message to people that were habitually abusing the system. So those are my comments. I'll let Marty chime in as well, and we're open to answer any questions.
Thank you. And thank you for meeting that Saturday. Basically, we took a spreadsheet that was given to us from staff, and I sent it over to Michael on Google Sheets, and we had the same spreadsheet, and he looked at it by himself, and I looked at it by myself, and then we met on Saturday, had a cup of coffee, and busted it out. because it could work like that, you know, when you're motivated, and we were tasked to get it back quickly, and we did it. So there you go. That's an instance of where it does move a little quickly, but it's also some bad news, you know, for people that habitually are parking in the red zone. That's one of the areas that we increased to the maximum. It's red for a reason. So it's an expensive ticket. I commute, and I don't drive in the is it $461 now if you're in the commuter lane? Wow. Well, why? Because it's $461. So the idea of from increasing it from 38 to 40, a $2 increase to curb or prohibit behavior isn't really going to motivate people. So that's why we went to the 50. So one thing noted of the street sweeping, I proposed not to increase that. And I was able to convince Michael to kind of go along a little bit on it. And that's not as much of a safety thing. It's more or less people just forgetting, I would think. That's my experience. I think moved here in 2000, in 16 years, I think I got 3 tickets. And earlier on, it was just come out the door and you forget that it was ticket day. And then, fortunately, the council did bump out the hours of enforcement, so it wasn't so early in the morning. But I have a little bit of an issue of the fundamental fining one side of town. I don't know why, but I still have an issue with one side of town gets a fine and the other side doesn't. So that explains why I really pushed for not increasing that fine. Any questions?
So why don't we allow the speaker, and then
Mr. Robert Rico.
Not sure who it is.
Robert Rico, 7th Avenue. I have a couple of questions that maybe the chief might want to answer a little bit. Under the code section 22500, which talks about blocking the driveway, can the resident still block his or her own driveway without getting a ticket if it's, I want to say, semi-legally parked there? In other words, not blocking the street and whatever? Because we were told earlier that it's the discretion of the officer a little bit, but if I park in front of my own driveway and I don't complain, why should I get a ticket? And secondly, relative to double parking, the 22500H double parking, what is the current process that the police department goes through on San Mateo Avenue to attempt to limit double parking? There are trucks that park from time to time to unload businesses. Some don't have a back delivery entrance, so they can only bring it in through the front. And at times there are people in cars double parking. So I think maybe you, the council, needs to understand a little bit what the process is. And the third item, as Councilmember Medina brought up on street cleaning, we were told relative to the Bel Air area is the city needs to keep crap out of the storm drains because it tends to plug things up. It's late at night, nobody's watching, and it causes overflows and flooding and whatever. So the Bel Air district is at the lower end. Everything comes down. So part of the reason to do the street cleaning down there is to keep the stuff out of the storm drains. And if the street sweepers can't get in, especially in the winter season, we're not doing maybe all that we should. So I think if potentially you need to consider raising a little bit the fine. Not that I want to get caught on street cleaning day, but I think there is some justification to do that to fulfill the desire of other requirements within the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So there were 3 questions, and why don't we see about Irene and Laura and Rico. If there's any questions. I did that on purpose. Irene.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the work you all did, but I don't agree with some of it. I agree with all the 40s that the staff had to 50s. I agree with Mr. Rico that street sweeping should be at 50, and maybe it's probably not easy to do, but we're going to really have to look at our storm drain system and how we clean streets and how we do that whole thing very comprehensively very soon, and how we're going to finance all of that with the zero, oh no, it just slipped my brain what it's called. Is Jimmy there? Jimmy, what's the new law? It's 2020 zero waste? Is that 2021? Oh, okay, a year. Zero waste into our storm drains. So the penalties for not doing that are very steep, and I believe from what I've heard in other places that the that the water board is going to be very, very strict about making sure that happens. So I'm with you. $50 for street sweeping should be there. I'm a little concerned about the bicycle on sidewalk. So you're saying if somebody leaves a bicycle on the sidewalk and it's blocking the sidewalk, you're going to charge them $75? Can't you just move the bicycle out of the sidewalk? That's, and then the same with blocking a driveway. We block our driveway all the time because we want to let our neighbors have the street parking, so we block our own driveway and block our own cars. And then parking on the sidewalk, yes, it can be a safety issue in some areas because people have a hard time walking around it, but I know in other areas where the streets are narrow, people block part of the sidewalk because they're trying to keep their cars safe from being hit because the streets are narrow and there's cars parked all over. So I'd keep that at 52. So I don't know what you want to do with my comments, except there they are.
Okay, why don't we just go down the line and collect them, Laura?
It's funny. Were you looking at my notes?
Never.
Because I had the same comment about the bicycle blocking, so $75. I was shocked about that one. I agree on the street sweeping. We think we need to up that one. And I also have the same questions, Robert, great questions about parking in front of the driveway, double parking, what's the process? So if we get some answers first.
Okay. For me, I had said it last time in my note here, it has been since 2010 that these have been raised. We get 60% on some aspects. You get a straight fee on other fines, depending on which ones they are. I've noticed that everything is raised for the most part, except abandonment vehicle on private property and street sweeping, and then of course stuff as administrative fee, return check fee, collection fee. So to me, to say that the street sweeping, and yes, I'm affected, should not be raised in 8 years, when obviously I'm sure fees get raised over a period of time. My last thing I'd suggest, even if it was 40, but something that also had some increase as the rest of the community is facing. I also had shared, I think we need to clarify too, we're talking about blocking the sidewalk or blocking the driveway. It's not meaning that persons can't get by, it just means that you're parked in front of your driveway, but there's still a complete access to get through. So just so we're on the same page. And then the bike one was another question I had. So with that, we also were asking about double parking and the blocking driveway, of course. And I don't know if staff or chief, you already look like you're ready to come up. We'd love to hear from you.
Good evening. So what question can I address for you this evening?
There was San Mateo Avenue on double parking was the first.
So to answer the question, I guess the question is concerning enforcement action regarding double parking. Okay. Is that the question from?
Yes.
It is the
Okay.
current, that is the question.
There is
Yes,
no
thank you, Chief.
concentrated or dedicated enforcement regarding double parking specifically. We know that it's a problem. The city is divided into 3 patrol beats. San Mateo Avenue is just one small portion of a much larger patrol area for a patrol officer. So there is no dedicated enforcement. We typically try to make sure that the street is clear, but we don't have officers looking for those violations if that's what we're being asked. We just don't have the capacity to do that at this time.
Chair,
Yeah.
Can I follow up on that?
Absolutely.
So Chief, if, say for example, somebody were unloading a truck in front of a business, they were right in front of the business, and it was clear that they were supplying that business, is that something that officers generally would not consider as serious as if, say, somebody had left their car there unattended in the middle of the street?
That's fair to say. Both would be addressed should the officer encounter it and not be running from one call to the other, or whether they were responding to a specific complaint regarding that particular instance.
And then the other one was in regards to blocking your own driveway with your vehicle.
So technically it is in violation to block any driveway, including your own. However, I think I've actually answered this question many times regarding many parking issues in front of this council, and we've made it abundantly clear that we do not respond, or we do not proactively enforce the blocking of a driveway. We only respond on a complaint basis. Therefore, we assume that the homeowner will not complain on themselves or any of their cohabitants. Technically, while it is a violation of the law, we understand that people do park in front of their own driveways, and we do not enforce that proactively. That's strictly a complaint-based enforcement approach on our behalf.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
I would like to point
Yes,
out, I know
please.
that the bicycle on the sidewalk has been brought up a couple times.
Yes.
That is actually a California Vehicle Code section and not a municipal code section. It does not mean it's against the law to park your bicycle on a sidewalk. It is against the law to ride your bicycle on a sidewalk. It just ended up in the code in this section because it's something that falls into the municipal code sections regarding enforcement. There are several code sections listed within the spreadsheet here that are actually California vehicle codes that are not technically parking violations, but other violations. So I wanted to clear that up. We're not going to fine people $75 for parking their bicycle on the sidewalk.
Any questions of the Chief Wise here?
To the chair, yeah, one
Yes.
more question. So, Chief, there have been some concerns raised about the bicycles, the
Line bike.
yeah, the line bikes and the other competitors in the city, and those bikes being abandoned in neighborhoods. So, is there anything in the code that would allow you or allow us to impose a fee on those companies or the riders if they were to abandon a bicycle somewhere inappropriately?
I would defer to both code enforcement and the city attorney as far as a remedy for that. From a vehicle code perspective or a penal code perspective, we really don't have an option as far as taking any type of enforcement action. Just like a child may leave their bike on the sidewalk and run into a market, we would take the same approach with any bicycle that's left. And oftentimes we don't have we don't have a license plate to issue a citation to a bicycle. So it's a little bit of a different animal, even though we know the vendor that's doing it. It's more of a administrative function rather than is an enforcement function. And right now is the way that we're dealing with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Mark, did you want to have anything to say, or
Oh,
not prepared?
No, only to say that I think the distinction is, on the one hand, what you have in front of you tonight is a fine schedule, and then on the other hand, you have a question of regulation of business activity in the city. So those really are two different things and handled in two different ways. And I'm actually not become aware of, there was a flurry of line bike activity for a while, but I just haven't become aware that there is any of that anymore at the moment, so.
So, through the chair, it
Please.
sounds like there's only a couple items that we, instead of going through the entire thing, it just sounded like the bicycle, sidewalk, blocking, writing can maybe be dropped down to $50, and then we can increase the street cleaning to 50. Were there any other changes that?
No, those are the three that I thought. On the street cleaning, I was thinking more 40, but that was just me. Obviously I want this to work, so Thoughts from the subcommittee?
Through the chair, regarding the bicycles, what are the thoughts on, and again, I wasn't as clear either that it referred to riding a bicycle on the sidewalk versus parking on it. So being that could be a safety concern, somebody riding a bicycle at maybe some high rate of speed on a sidewalk, it becomes a safety issue.
True,
Do
but
we s-
most people who ride bicycles are probably going to be kids, so now we're fining kids to $75.
I believe they can drive up to 12 on the sidewalk. Is that right, Chief?
They don't start riding their bikes till 12 nowadays. I don't.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to be the guy
It would
finding
be
kids.
probably discretion, you see a guy or a girl riding their bike with, young. probably
How about
would be
this?
okay.
We go down and ask each other. So it's we have 50, we have 75. We'll make it kind of like.
With the baby?
Well,
Yeah, I'll go along with the recommendation. So I just wanted to make sure that
which one?
Yeah, 50.
What's
50?
being proposed.
Marty?
Fifty's fine.
Okay. That takes care of that. I think the other one was in regards to blocking the driveway. Thoughts?
Well, that'll be if somebody that is not living in the house, that.
Your-
Mike.
I'm so sorry. That would be the case where somebody that doesn't live in the house is actually blocking your driveway and they would get a $100 ticket.
Well, yes, except technically it could be any of them. If my neighbor across the street gets mad at me and I have my car in front of my driveway, he can call in and the police can come and give me a $100 ticket.
No, I thought the answer was, I'm sorry, Chief.
No, I think if somebody complains.
Oh,
they
if
can
somebody
enforce it.
complains?
Yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be you.
Oh, we'll find out.
I'm sorry?
I think they're going back to if somebody, I park in front of my driveway, somebody across the street calls, officer comes out, would my car get cited?
No, we run the license plate to make sure that it doesn't, as long as it's registered to your home, that's the first thing we're going to do. I would like to point out too that in addition to a citation, your car's also subject to be towed, which would include you having to pay a release fee to the police department in the amount of $85 and any tow or storage fees to the tow company. So if somebody's blocking your driveway, prohibiting you from either entering or leaving your garage or driveway area, we do have the legal authority to tow your vehicle as well as to cite it. But we would check to see who the registered owner is and make sure it doesn't correspond with the address from where we're towing the car. That's assuming that you've kept your registration current with your address, of course.
Thank you.
Your daughter who
So,
lives in
thoughts
Monterey.
on the fee for blocking?
I still think it should be 50, but
I hear 50.
I'm in agreement.
50. Gentlemen?
It's somebody blocking somebody's driveway is a pretty rude thing to do. I think it's, the max is appropriate.
Which is what, 100?
$100.
Michael?
50 on top of getting towed, though, potentially getting towed. I mean, it could get
Citation.
ugly.
Yeah, and tow,
For Unity, okay.
You get, it's going to cost you $200
50
to
more?
car out of a tow.
What do you want?
if you get it that day.
So what do you say, Michael?
Yeah.
50,
I'll-
50.
yeah,
Okay,
we'll
I'll go with
along
50. I was going to say 75. Okay, 50. So we've got 50, 50. Now we're at street sweeping.
And I actually wanted added one more, the parking on the sidewalk. The parking on the sidewalk, residents get dinged for just actually parking, is that also on the?
Is your mic?
Oh, parking on their driveway with their back end of their vehicle is parked on the sidewalk. And that's also kind of a,
And we looked at that also as a safety issue because we've
For
heard from
handicap,
people,
for whoever
with people in wheelchairs,
Okay.
Mothers with strollers or fathers with strollers, people walking dogs that have to step out into the street. It could be an issue if enough of the sidewalk is blocked. I think if it's sticking out a little, nobody would complain. They would just go around. But we felt that was a safety issue.
okay.
So we're going to keep it where it's at?
Keep it
with
where
the
it's at.
recommendation, okay? And then the final thing is street sweeping. It's at 38.
50.
I hear 50.
Second.
50. Marty?
Can we go with staff's recommendation of 40?
That was the mayor's. And
Whoa,
staff.
whoa, whoa. And the
Michael?
mayor.
I know how strongly Marty felt about this, so I'll go along with 40 as well.
And I'll go 40. Okay, so we have 40 on street sweeping, sidewalk is 50, blocking driveway is 50, and the park on the sidewalk is 50, I think, if I've got all that correct. City Clerk? Okay. So with those changes, in all sincerity, thank you to Marty and Michael for meeting quickly. It was a two-week turnaround time. Staff had already provided us a lot of the information, but thank you very much for doing that. Is everything, go ahead. We don't want to go over this again. Mark, we okay? City Clerk, we're okay?
We're good.
Okay. So with those changes, as we've all concurred, or majority of us concurred on one, can we get adopt the resolution? Somebody want to introduce the resolution?
I'll introduce resolution.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell? Aye. Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.